Good evening, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather, and appreciate you joining me. Obviously, a very daunting task here, trying to forecast the tropics and intensification, but Helene continues to grow in size and is intensifying quickly before making landfall here in the Big Bend area this evening. Helene now up to a Category 4 hurricane, as I had personally been expecting over the last several days. It rapidly intensified from a Category 1 this morning to a 2 later in the morning, to a 3 this afternoon, to a 4 here this evening. Winds at this recording are up to 130 miles per hour. I still think there could be a little bit more strengthening based on radar trends. And this may be a high-end Category 4 at some point here before it makes landfall. We saw this with storms like Michael back in 2018. But the other side of the story here is that this storm is going to be moving very quickly inland into an area that's already getting a ton of rain. And we've got some major impacts that go well past the coastal sections dealing with the rain and the wind and the storm surge. We're talking about the potential for hurricane-force winds to make it all the way up into North Georgia, upstate South Carolina, and western North Carolina overnight tonight and first thing tomorrow. An increasing risk for tornadoes east of the storm center across eastern Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, maybe even into Virginia here over the next 24 hours. And just all kinds of issues here. And so I'm going to talk about Helene mostly in this video. We do have some other storms to take a look at here in the not so distant future. Here is what the storm has done today. And you can see it gathered strength this morning. Just an extremely big amount of outflow here being picked up and drawn northeast. Sorry for these flickers here from this website, but definitely check it out here, star.nesdis.noaa.gov. We'll give you all the latest GOES satellite information. And we're going to be approaching landfall here in the next few hours. Helene on the map here, Category 4. We have Tropical Storm Isaac, a new system that could become a depression or storm. The next name is Joyce. And it's not too soon to start taking a look down the road here, and maybe the not so distant future, maybe another storm forming in a similar spot to where Helene formed, and a potential Gulf threat coming up here, maybe in as soon as 5 to 6 days, believe it or not. So we're going to talk about that a little bit towards the end, but a little bit of time still to worry about that. Here is Helene getting ready to make landfall, moving at 23 miles per hour to the north-northeast. I have not seen a storm in the northern Gulf move this quickly since Hurricane Opal. Back in 1995, that was a storm of similar intensity, except right before landfall when it did make a weakening trend. This one could weaken a little bit right before it hits, but probably won't be much at this point. On the rest of the map, we do have Hurricane John, which was looking like it was going to get stronger, but fortunately that strengthening has halted, affecting Mexico with incredible amounts of rain. Keep an eye on this tropical wave here that is going to be moving into the Western Caribbean in a few days. After Helene leaves and goes up in this direction here, the wind shear behind Helene is going to relax. The water temperatures are still very warm in here, and I do think we do need to obviously keep a pretty close eye on that. Across the rest of the tropics, Helene here, this wave that we're watching, this is Tropical Storm Isaac, could become a hurricane as it moves in this direction. This system could be our next depression, but will likely head in this direction. And we have more waves that are set to come off of Africa. And finally, we're seeing the African wave train about a month or so later than I think a lot of us expected. But keep an eye on this one, and there's another one that is expected to come off behind it. And those storms do need to be watched down the road. So here's a look at Helene. And you can see here, let me update this. It is a Category 4 zoomer. Oh, here we go, I think. There it is. As of 6:20 p.m. Eastern, 130 mile per hour storm. And you can see it continues to grow. This is not just a hurricane right near the core, but a storm that is growing, and hurricane force winds extend out over quite a big of an area, which is why we have the hurricane warning from basically Mexico Beach down through Port St. Joe, Apalachicola, right around the entire Big Bend. And the strongest winds are going to be on the northern side of this eye wall and maybe just east of the center. So Perry, Florida, Taylor County likely to get hit hardest out of this, even though the landfall could still technically be in Wakulla or Jefferson County, but likely Taylor County gets hammered hard for the third time in 13 months. It's just getting ridiculous. And we still have the hurricane warning that extends all the way down to north of Tampa Bay. Tropical storm warning down the rest of the coast of Florida, inland Florida in that tropical storm warning. Tropical storm warning back to near Destin, Florida, Panama City in that. You guys are going to miss the worst of the wind, but you will continue to have some rough wind tonight. And then we do have the potential for this storm to basically hit Perry, Florida, Perry, Georgia, go potentially through Macon, Georgia, and eventually into the Atlanta metro area, especially on the eastern side. And I do personally think that this may get adjusted to the right still. We could see the track maybe narrowly escape going directly over to Atlanta and instead come closer to places like Milledgeville and Athens, Gainesville, maybe even Helen, Georgia. Helene might be sick of people calling her Helen and getting Helen back. I don't know. And I'm not going to joke about that. It's just, that's just the nature of this beast, unfortunately. It will weaken tonight and tomorrow and should be a post-tropical cyclone over East Tennessee tomorrow afternoon and a remnant low here across Kentucky, getting absorbed into our upper level system. Here is the map from the National Hurricane Center. And this shows, at this time, it was showing 125 mile per hour winds. Those are up to 130, and they're probably getting stronger as we speak. But hurricane warnings extend all the way up into central Georgia, including Milledgeville and Macon. Tropical storm warnings covered the remainder of northern and eastern Georgia, as well as all of South Carolina and a good chunk of western North Carolina, eastern Alabama. I haven't talked a lot about you guys in Alabama because you're actually on the good side, but you're getting the rain, you're getting the wind here tonight. The eastern panhandle, close to the Big Bend in the central time zone, is going to be in the tropical storm warning still for a while longer. And we'll continue to have tropical storm warnings across South Florida, although those should start to get lifted here later tonight as the storm accelerates northward. We've talked about the storm surge, incredibly high, 15 to 20 feet, unsurvivable east of the center of the storm. That is going downhill fast. This video is going live around 7 Eastern. I expect that surf's going to double and triple between now and then, getting up to 15 to 20 feet. And we have high surge continuing into the Tampa Bay, both the Old Bay as well as the other inlet. I don't even know the name of it. I'm sorry. But if you're in the Tampa Bay area, you obviously know. So here's a look at the satellite. You can see that the amount of moisture here over the Eastern Gulf is incredibly high. Very strong outflow, building our clouds well to the north, wind shear picking up. We've had tornado warnings as far north as Raleigh, North Carolina this evening, across South Carolina and Georgia under tornado warnings. But there's a very sharp cutoff, and you can see here at the very end of this loop, there is some dry air and a strong amount of west-southwesterly wind shear that will eventually get to the storm. It is not getting there soon enough to weaken it, but eventually it will be a factor later on here that slows down our storm quite a bit and gets into the southwest side of it. But not getting there right now. I don't think we have enough time to see this weaken. If anything, I think it will still strengthen some over the next few hours, and landfall should be here in about 4 hours or so. The very last satellite images before the sun goes down are daunting. You can see here just incredible bursts of incredible thunderstorms circling the center here. The eye is mostly cleared out. There's some high clouds over it, but very easy to see here. Just a very healthy core and one that continues to grow here as the storm is doing, I don't want to say the unthinkable because I thought it would happen, but it is doing the unthinkable. Here's our radar image out of the southeast, and you can see very clear eye here. Dry air not really getting into it, but in the very last frame here, and I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, in the very last frame, you can see that some of that wind shear is trying to maybe break up a little bit of the southwestern side of the eye. And this is probably what's going to keep this from going to Category 5. I thought that there was a better chance of it getting to 5 a few days ago, but I never explicitly called it a Category 5. I thought 4 was a very reasonable forecast. But it is starting to degrade a little bit of the southwestern eye wall. It's not going to get into the northern eye wall, I don't think, here before we have landfall. So we are going to see this moving quickly north-northeast. It's going to be landfalling here around 11 o'clock. I did want to show you aircraft data coming in from NOAA Recon here, and you can see the last plane that left us with pressures that dropped 10 millibars during that flight. The pressure continues to fall, 948, which is borderline Category 4 being measured here about half an hour ago. What you will notice here is that we definitely have a stronger hurricane with wind speeds that are in the Category 3 to 4 zone at flight level. And what you can also see is that the winds that are reaching hurricane force have continued to grow on the northern and eastern side. So a very healthy storm that we see here, and one that continues to grow in size. And the latest, I'm going to try to pull up the latest data. Tropical Tidbits has been getting hit hard, as you might imagine. Here we go. And you can see going right back in here now, and I think the pressure's dropped even further because it's measuring hurricane force winds with the pressure at 948. What that means is as the pressure drops, the storm gets more intense. Until it gets to the calm part of the storm, it's going to read lower and lower pressure. So I'll come back to this at the end, but more than likely this storm is still strengthening. And you can probably see that here where the flight level winds were up to about 150 miles per hour, which if you translate that down to the ground, leads us to about 130 miles per hour. Just went through the storm again. They were not quite that high, but the pressure is still falling. So we're going to see a little bit more here at the end. Now, the other thing that's important is that the track has shifted again a little bit to the right here, moving away from Gulf County, from Franklin County, from Wakulla County, and aiming more towards Taylor County. And I really just hate to say that. I just have to cringe because Taylor County's had 2 hurricanes since last August. We had Idalia at the end of last August. We had Debbie back here this August. And here we go again at the end of September, and we're dealing with yet another direct strike on the same exact area. Hurricane model intensity forecast has been pitiful. Here's the problem here. It just does it in 12-hour increments, and there's a window in here between 0 and 12 where it's obviously gotten up to Category 4. But the good news, landfall is going to be in here. We're going to see a very quick decrease in intensity. And by the time you guys wake up in the morning here, we will already be down to Category 1 strength as the storm moves into central Georgia. And then I think by the lunchtime hour, maybe a little before then, we'll have a tropical storm and then a remnant low by the time we get to tomorrow night. So it is going to wind down eventually, but it's going to take some time to do that. Here's a look at the expected radar, and you can see a little bit of that wobble to the right here. Landfall coming in near just to the west of Keaton Beach. Perry, Florida is going to be right in that. And then Valdosta gets into the eye wall here. Here's the timetable on this, by the way. The eye wall moves on shore here at about 10 o'clock Eastern time, and the center makes official landfall right around 11 o'clock, give or take. It will be out of Perry by midnight. The winds will still be strong, but they'll switch around. The eye wall moves into Valdosta just after midnight, and they get pounded between 12 and 1 in the morning while many are sleeping. It continues northward into places like Dublin, Georgia, here by about 3 in the morning. And if you're east of this, by the way, you're going to get some strong winds on the coast, including Savannah and Pooler and Richmond Hill and those areas here. You're going to get strong winds in places like Jessup and Brunswick, even though the worst of the rain stays to your west. And keep an eye on these cells up in here because you can see there's going to be some threat for some rotation here as this line moves in. And in fact, I do think we're going to see several tornado warnings overnight. So make sure you have a way of receiving those warnings as these cells continue to rotate in off the water very quickly during the overnight hours. Tomorrow in Florida, we will have just a few leftover bands hitting from the southwest. The tornado threat will be gone. And fortunately, we are going to have a cold front, so it will be drying out and turning significantly less humid for tomorrow behind our storm as folks gradually get to clean up from it. Here's a look at potential wind speeds. The NAM has come down just a bit, but still very intense. We see wind gusts that will exceed 100 miles per hour. Offshore, they should be up to 150, give or take. Even inland into southern Georgia, because of how fast this storm is moving, it doesn't have as much time to spin down. So we are likely going to have hurricane force wind gusts and maybe even sustained hurricane force winds over 200 miles inland. If you guys in Charlotte, North Carolina, remember Hurricane Hugo from 1989, you're like 200 plus miles inland from Georgetown, South Carolina, where the storm hit. You had hurricane force winds. Same for those of you in Raleigh that got hit by Hurricane Fran in 1996. Same thing. Faster moving storms. They don't drop quite as much rain, but they take a lot longer to spin down. So that is something we need to be very mindful of. And I'm sure you've heard it from a lot of other folks. But again, this continues to be a pretty big threat. Eastern Georgia, maybe Augusta, Lake Hartwell, Seneca, South Carolina, Pickens and Oconee counties especially, but even Greenville and maybe Wade, Hampton, and Greer and those areas here, Greenwood, potentially some hurricane force winds. Same for North Georgia, especially these higher elevations here. I don't think Atlanta gets a hurricane force wind, but if this shifts left a little bit, it could still be very windy. But when you get about an hour east of Atlanta, that's where the winds really get nasty here. And the time frame on that, by the way, will be around 2 to 3 in the morning when that strong wind hits. The worst will be around 4 or 5 in the morning, and then it moves up into the Western Carolinas after daybreak. Even Charlotte, North Carolina could see wind gusts that are approaching high-end tropical storm force, and places like Shelby and on west to Kings Mountain could see hurricane force wind gusts, and especially in the higher elevations, we have the potential to have winds that may even gust up to 100 miles per hour. I'm not quite as sure about Kentucky seeing these strong winds tomorrow morning, but keep in mind that could certainly still be a possibility. We're not going to talk all day. We're going to talk some brief bursts in bands of rain, but enough that can cause power outages in eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, western Virginia, east and middle Tennessee. And then this storm should dissipate by the time, not dissipate fully, but no longer be a tropical storm by the time we get to tomorrow evening. But honestly, I'm going to repeat myself over and over again with landfalling systems. The biggest problem we have inland is flooding. And when you bring the mountains into play and already a very saturated environment, we have potentially what could be some areas in Western North Carolina that have their worst flood in over 100 years. When I did my video this morning and talked about a generational storm, that is the part that I was most concerned about for inland areas, is the incredible amount of flooding. We have the potential to see 18 inches plus of rain. Hendersonville area, Brevard, Conisty Falls, those areas in North Carolina, Canton, same places that have been hit by remnant storms that have come up in this direction are going to get hit hard. The Biltmore Village area of Asheville, the French Broad River. And the problem, too, is that after the rain stops and all the rain comes down from the mountain, the rivers continue to climb. It may be dry by tomorrow night, but the rivers may continue to climb and cause longer-term flooding that lasts us into the weekend. That could drain into South Carolina and North Georgia as well. So just a very volatile situation, one that's still going to change quite a bit here, I think, tonight, even though the forecast confidence is pretty high. And you can see our amounts of rain through the weekend are very significant, up to 14, 15 inches in Western North Carolina. And the rest of the storm has the potential to bring some incredible rain and needed rain for parts of the Ohio Valley, albeit it's going to be pretty heavy. Here's a closer look from weatherbell.com, the Weather Prediction Center official forecast calls for, generally speaking, 5 to 10 inches more of rain on top of the 5 to 10 we've already had in this area. Significant rain for parts of Virginia and West Virginia, and a nice soaking for parts of Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, northeastern Alabama, even northern Mississippi, downstate Illinois and Indiana are going to see some welcome rain. Not welcome where it's coming down very hard, but welcome up in here. Severe weather. We have an enhanced risk for tornadoes overnight. Southeast Georgia, the low country, maybe even the Midlands of South Carolina, and sneaking up late at night into the Wilmington area, which is still cleaning up from last week's unnamed tropical storm. We have seen a few tornadoes already in the last couple of days around Charlotte, in the mountains even, in a tornado warning in Raleigh. We still have a threat overnight for that, but I think tomorrow is actually going to be a little bit better chance for tornadoes in North Carolina and maybe the southern tier of Virginia in the afternoon. It should start to improve from Columbia and Charleston on south and west after the first portion of the day. You can see we've got a pretty good amount of wind shear. Tornado parameters are high here overnight tonight. And as we head into the day tomorrow, we're going to see these numbers climbing by daybreak. This is 6 a.m. tomorrow. South Carolina is at highest risk. But as the morning wears on, we see that risk growing quickly for southern parts of North Carolina in the morning, and maybe even getting to the North Carolina-Virginia border by lunchtime. Raleigh, North Carolina, Moore County, Southern Pines, even potentially Charlotte, Asheboro, Wadesboro, all these areas have a risk of seeing a tornado tomorrow. And we'll see that chance climb in coastal and down eastern North Carolina as well from mid-morning on, including Wilmington, including Havelock, including Atlantic Beach, including Greenville, Aurora, North Carolina, maybe even sneaking up into southern parts of Virginia here during the late afternoon hours. There's enough wind shear for there to be tornadoes, and I think this kind of storm can produce quite a few tornadoes. So that's it for Helene. Let's take a look real quick at the rest of the tropics. This is Invest 98L. Here's a robust wave we need to watch. There's another one in between the two, and neither of these looks like they're going to be a threat to land at this point. And then in the North Atlantic, this is Tropical Storm Isaac, which could become a hurricane as it moves into this direction here, but no threat to land at this point. So I'll very quickly run through those for you. This is our Invest. Winds are approaching tropical depression strength, and it may become a depression overnight tonight. And the next name on the list would be Joyce. This is Tropical Storm Isaac. Winds are about 50 miles per hour, expected to strengthen gradually tomorrow, then become briefly a hurricane early Saturday, and then reach cooler waters and weaken after that. This is Hurricane John in the Pacific, Category 1 storm. Earlier, there were concerns it could get a lot stronger, but looks like it is approaching the coast, and these mountains of southern Mexico and southwestern Mexico are going to cause the storm to be disrupted, but not before dumping just a ton of rain over this area. Some places here getting 40, 50 inches of rain this week. Just incredible stuff. And you can see why. This system has distanced itself from Helene, which is up over here. There's enough spacing here, and just a big rainmaker here drifting along the coast. Eventually, it's going to die when it hits cooler water and wind shear at this point. So that is John. You can see the forecast here. Hurricane warning in effect. Storm should make its way inland early tomorrow and weaken significantly after that. Here's where the models take it, and no longer expected to be a major hurricane. All right, we can't ignore this anymore. I have chatted a little bit about this potential, but the wave in the Eastern Caribbean is going to move into a more favorable spot, and no chance that it'll develop between now and Saturday, but sometime early next week, I think conditions could become more favorable. The Hurricane Center, for the time being, has a 20% chance of that developing. As we've seen with the last couple, this chance is likely to climb, and I think it'll be a high risk of development by the time we get to next Tuesday or Wednesday. Here's a look at what that model is showing. Low chance, but maybe a moderate chance by the time this gets close to Honduras on Wednesday, and then our chances may start to climb here. And we have some model disagreement, as you would expect. Some models have more of a threat to the Northwest Caribbean than the Southern Gulf. But the timeline on this could be as soon as later next week. I'll show you the operational GFS. Don't get too carried away with it, but it's got an idea of development a little farther east of where Helene developed by Wednesday. And it takes the storm over Cuba and unfortunately is showing a hurricane in the Southeast Gulf again next weekend, something that Florida needs to keep an eye on. This is just one model run. It can change, and it probably will a million times, as the run before was showing it developing farther west and going into the Southern Gulf, but eventually stopping and turning northeast. So really, in my opinion, anyone from, say, Louisiana to Florida really does want to keep a closer eye on this. Until it forms, we're not going to know just yet. The European model is not as aggressive, but it is showing a storm signal here near the Yucatan late next week, in about a week, and then a strengthening system in the Western Gulf by next weekend. European ensemble solutions are showing, as you would expect, a big number of model solutions here, but several in the Northwest Caribbean late next week, several in the Western Gulf. There's some divergence here, with some turning northeast in this direction towards Florida, maybe as soon as next weekend, some coming out into here, maybe threatening Louisiana, and some stuck down here for a while longer. But I don't think we're going to see anything in this area. I think anything that does form either dies down here or eventually gets picked up and kicked off to the north and east. So we've got time to watch it. We do need to watch closely, though. I'm going to say that with confidence. Our ensemble solutions show anywhere from at the end of next week, maybe Florida has to be watching, to next weekend, Florida to the Central Gulf Coast, to potentially something later in the week. And we've got a lot more going on out in the open Atlantic. The Canadian's also showing some development on several of its ensembles centered around the Yucatan or the Western Caribbean Thursday. And again, looks like the Gulf is our end target here. At some point next weekend, we're going to have several changes in this forecast to come. So just stay tuned. I'm not going to get much of a break here. I want to take a few days off to recover, but we're going to have something to track next week for sure. I hope you all have a wonderful night. Please be safe. Thank you so much for trusting me through this storm. And if you're a first-time visitor, you've been here once or twice, I'd appreciate it if you became a subscriber here. I am a meteorologist. I realize that some of the headlines are a little bit alarming. I understand that. And this is hurricane season. Get used to it. But as always, I appreciate your time today. I want to give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who has blessed me with this gift as a meteorologist to try and help save lives. That is my goal here. It's not to alarm people so much as to prepare them and to hopefully save somebody's life. I hope somebody here that watched here made a decision based on a forecast they felt good about that could change their lives and save their lives. The Lord will guard you from the evil one. 2 Thessalonians 3:3, Paul tells the church that, but the Lord is faithful, who will establish you and guard you from the evil one. The evil one could be a person. It could be a power out there. It could be natural disasters. Either way, we all need to repent and turn to God and ask him for mercy, because he has changed so many folks' lives. He's changed my life. I was in a spot where I had no future. I didn't feel worthwhile. I didn't feel any worth. All I felt was betrayal from people around me. But as soon as I accepted Jesus as my Savior, I realized that I was taking a much bigger step, a hard step, but a step that eternally is going to save me. And being guarded from evil out there, we can't avoid it, but we can turn to God. And as soon as we tell our challenges how big our God is, our life will change. So all I ask is that no matter what you believe, you just understand that you are a blessing to other people and that you matter. And if you have any prayer requests, I will take time tonight to pray for you. Hope you all have a great day. I'll catch you again on Friday. God bless.